Welcome to the first part of the LEGO Western World my son and I are building. This is what it looks like right now, so let me take you through the process of how we build it. Inspired by some of the other creators on YouTube, we wanted to build our own world, but, and this is an important part, a world that is not meant to be displayed only, but that my son is actually playing with. So we'll try out different things along the way and we will likely change some of the things we've built over time. But how did we start? So it all started with this 48 by 48 base plate. And the first thing we wanted to do is create a riverbed or, outline the path of how our river is flowing through our world. And the reason we did that, and that's also the reason why we've used these reddish brown plates, is that we wanted to give the river a more natural look and feel. So what you'll notice is we've added translight blue plates on top of the reddish brown ones, so the water assumes a more natural color. Now what you see in this shot is already a few days later, and a couple of things have happened. We've added a second base plate to expand the world and continue the flow of the river, and my son also brought in a few cowboys and built these paper tents. So some of you might remember that LEGO produced a couple of Western sets in the 90s that also had Native Americans and teepees, and both the tents and the minifigures can be quite expensive. So this was his way of introducing some life into the world. We've also looked at buying some of the old minifigs, and we'll get to that in a second. But what you'll also notice is that in order to make the river look more realistic, we've added trans blue tiles on top of the trans blue plates. With the reddish brown plates underneath that we've used as the initial layer, we were quite happy with how this turned out. We've also experimented with building some hills here, which will eventually morph into the canyon that we've decided to build and that you saw in the first shot of the video. Now jumping forward about 2 weeks, we now have 4 base plates and a lot more has happened. So for one, we've used wedge plates to make the flow of the river look a little bit more natural, and then also started to introduce some plant life around the riverbed. And you'll also notice quite a few little hills that my son has been building and experimenting with. And then in the back, there's like a bigger mountain range we've started to create, and I'll get to that in a second. But we've also bought a couple of the old Native American minifigures that I've mentioned before, plus some of their tippies. So, one of these tents is like 10 euros, and that's the cheapest one you can find, at least in a decent condition. There's another model even with, which is even more expensive, which is starting around 20 euros, I think. And that's the reason why we've also created a couple of cloth tents, because my son was very eager to get as many tents as possible into the world. But at 6 years old, he doesn't yet quite appreciate what all of this costs, right? So let's see if we'll upgrade these self-made tents at some point in the future. Now let me give you a little bit of a better look at the river. I really like how it looks with the wedge plates, and the idea is that we'll introduce small plants along the way and also change some of the colors that don't quite match, like these orange leaves you see here. Now when we jump to the other side of our world, you'll get a better view of the mountain range we're building. This is supposed to do a couple of things. So we want this to become one side of the canyon that the river is running through, but we also wanted to create it in a modular way. Now remember, my son is also playing with that world, right? So the requirement to this mountain range was that we could access the interior easily, and that's why we are planning to have a top layer that you can simply remove. You can see a couple of minifigures laying inside the mountain already, and that is because we want the interior to become either a mine or maybe a lair or hideout for some bandits of some sorts. We haven't quite figured that part out yet, to be honest, but we'll get there, I'm sure. And obviously the green plate will not stay like that. That was just used because, we didn't have any other parts at hand at that moment, and basically just used it for testing. So now, switching back to the other side, I'm starting to build up the mountain range. And we'll stick with different earthy colors like dark tan, medium nougat, and dark orange. Now, one of the challenges of building this is that the mountain will eventually become quite big. So in order to be able to remove the top part without breaking the whole thing, we've split it in 2 parts basically. So there are 2 separate parts of the mountain that you will be able to remove, both of which are not connected to each other at all. So the challenge was to create a slope that looks natural but doesn't give away that it's actually 2 separate parts at first glance. You can also see what we've used to stabilize the whole structure. So going forward, my goal is to raise this up quite some more How far, I don't yet know, so definitely stay tuned for that. And while I was working on the big mountain, you can see my son working on some smaller hills, trying out some things, and we'll actually be using some of these hills for sure in the future. And he also added a part that leads to the little village we've built out of different tiles and plates. And you can see the first one of the tipis being included in the village as well, plus some wildlife and other things along the way, like little scorpions and things like that. So I'm super excited to see where this all goes, and I hope you are too. So consider subscribing to our channel if you don't want to miss the next update, which is right around the corner. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.